next news article, we actually have an email. I'm going to read that first. Grant from Pleasant Prairie, Wisconsin. Hey, dudes, curious what you all think of the new Analogue 64. Are any of you planning on getting it? So, yes, that alludes to they have announced the next Analogue.
Well, they announced it a year ago.
They announced it a year ago, yeah, but this is the true announcement of it's going to be ready to go. I think doesn't it ship in the spring?
Probably.
Yeah,
Analog is weird.
February
They didn't give I don't think they gave a date. Yeah, they just gave like a window, but the reserves go live for it on the 21st. And that is the Analog. It's known as the Analogue 3D. So it's a 64. So it allows you to play your 64 games in 4K, which I would have been fine with 1080p.
Those games able to play in 4K?
I don't know, man. Like, there's gonna be a lot of ugly ass looking 64 games.
You're gonna see some real smooth polygons.
Look, I love all the games that came out on the 64, but I would not pay for this thing just to play those.
This thing is $250.
It is $250 without a controller. The controller is an additional $40, or obviously if you have a 64 controller, you can plug it in.
But yeah, the short answer is fuck this thing. Like, no way.
The redesign, their like 8-bit do redesigned 64 controller, awesome.
Well, I have some of those like brawlers.
It's like 64s. The retro fighter. Yeah,
I have some of those. Which would be fine, but $250. Well, the other important thing is all this thing does is play 64 games.
Yeah.
It cannot do anything else. You cannot load ROMs into it. You can't.
It doesn't support Open FGA.
Right. It has nothing.
FPGA. So yeah, you can't load ROMs into it like the other systems. I can't dump ROMs off it. Like that is the one part of it. It's kind of disappointing. So yeah, I mean it is tailor made for a specific market, but as we know, there is a market for a high end 64.
I think they did say that it supports save states at least, which is something.
It has a new version of like their like OS.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
which their OS doesn't really do much outside of exist. A lot of people thought it would do a lot more for the Pocket, but it really doesn't do jack on the Pocket. The Pocket's made for playing your old games or putting an SD card in it.
Yeah.
This thing though, like, I get why it's expensive. I can imagine the cost of making a 4K Nintendo 64 is probably on the high end, but I just don't. This is for like the hardest of hardest N64 people.
This is for the people that have their full set collections, that want a great way to play
the neon games. Sign, their T-shirt, their hat.
The people that are still playing Mario Kart 64 every weekend in 2024.
Even though you can play many of the decent stuff you want on the Switch, and the Switch probably on the Switch too, which should probably be 4K. So.
Or you can just grab your GameCube that has a handle, play Mario Kart there.
Play the true Double Dash. Play the true
Double Dash instead.
I don't know. I'm on the record of the 64 as a trash system anyway.
Yeah.
So $250 to play it in HD is nothing to me. No.
Yeah, I think we were talking the other day, like obviously the original NES one was very expensive. I never got.
Well, that was meant to be like a collector's special.
Yeah.
It's made out of metal. It's $500.
But I have the Super Nintendo one, and that was $189. I was happy
to pay for that one,
and I love that thing. So yeah, and that means a little bit more to me for that generation. But this, for just maybe wanting to play those couple wrestling games, or for the person in me wanting to play Castlevania 64.
If it had a way to just plug in a USB something and you could play any 64 game, then there's a value to it.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
But if I've got to physically own it, no.
The other thing for me too is I don't have obviously I played a ton of 64 games at that time when I owned a 64 as a kid. Going back to them today, it's not a generation that I have returned to very much. Like anytime I return to that generation, it's PS1 stuff or Dreamcast, because that was kind of in the mix there. But I imagine a lot of that for me today, returning to try and play some of those 64 games, it would be just unplayable.
It's brutal.
Because I think of being really excited for Jet Force Gemini on the Rare Replay.
Oh man!
And then just try and being like, I can't do this.
No, I love that game. On 64, I played that game all the time. It's unplayable on a modern console. I don't know if I could ever go back to that. or
Exactly.
even like Perfect Dark, or a game I played probably 1,000 hours of with friends. I can't anymore. And Banjo-Kazooie, there's a better way to play it. And I don't think Mario 64 is a good game. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's not.
No, there is a group of people that agree with that.
Yeah, but like
I would say
stuff like Mario Kart, sure, that is fun. And I think Mario Kart will always be fun. A game like Pokemon Snap is kind of fun to just kind of play. And the stadium games are not much of a game, but okay. And
even as a kid who liked the 64 as a kid,
sure,
I always treated Mario 64 as more of a tech demo of what Mario could be on the 64 than actually like a real Mario game compared to everything else. So,
well, and like Ocarina and Majora's Mask, there's a better way to play them.
There are better ways to play those now.
So, yeah,
the only thing you're really missing out on are those damn wrestling games. Because boy,
those are fantastic.
That was the King era.
Because you can't get those again.
No, and that was the King era of those games.
Yeah,
like every one of them, WCW, WWF, whatever, they were all great.
Yeah, I got all of them.
So, yeah, they're all great.
Yeah, agreed though. But $250 for a console like that is just like you guys say. I mean, the N64 wasn't like the best generation of gaming, and I can't imagine paying $250 just for 4K. No, it's just not worth it.
To not do anything else over if I just got my 64 out and hooked it up.
Exactly.
Other than 4K. Like, right. I think Kyle, you and I were joking, like, it has a Wi-Fi adapter in it.
Yeah.
Just for updates?
I assume because it's not like you're going to be able to play people online.
Imagine a world where that lets you play Smash Brothers. That lets you play Smash Brothers online.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. The funny part is, like, this thing's going to sell out anyway. And here's a secret. You really want one? Just wait. They're going to do the fantastic fucking colors in like a year.
Oh, yeah.
Look at how many fucking pockets there are. I feel like an idiot for buying them with a white one. When they have orange and green and all the colors, and it's like,
pay a little bit more money and get an aluminum one.
Yeah. But they're going to release fantastic N64s.
Absolutely.
Get a watermelon, man. Wait for
They already have plans for that, I guarantee you.
Maybe they'll do a Pikachu one.
It's the kind of thing too where I look back on it now and I think like, I think part of the reason why as a kid I gravitated towards getting a PS1 was because I just got tired of the 64, and I just realized like, man, and once I got a PS1, like I wouldn't sit here and say like my 64 collected dust, but I played the PS1 a lot more.
But look at the 64 compared to the PS. It has no RPGs. The sports games are bad.
64.
Like outside of
fighting games,
outside of maybe
versions of fighting games were bad compared.
Resident Evil 2 bad.
That's a very bad.
Like stuff that was supposed to come out for. Remember, Final Fantasy VII was almost a 64 game at one point until they realized there's no fucking way this thing can work. Remember, they had to put out a memory thing for it to just work with certain games later on.
I remember having to go and get that thing.
And you know what the crazy part about that is?
That to my parents.
Like Donkey Kong 64, the Donkey Kong 64 needed it to the point where they shipped it in the box because there was a thing where I don't think, maybe it's a wives' tale or whatever, but they supposedly if you didn't have that thing in there, the game would just crash. But if it was in there, the game would work, and they didn't know why specifically. So, but then like Perfect Dark, you don't have one of those. You can play half the game. Majora's Mask, I think you needed it from Majora's Mask too.
I believe you needed it for Majora's Mask. I think that was a game where it was required, but it did not come with it. Okay, you definitely needed it for Perfect Dark. I know that
you needed it for Perfect Dark to play more than half of the game. It would give you a little pop up that says like, "Hey, you can only play like single player." That's it.
And also say like that was the thing too, where like that was what made me return to the system was Perfect Dark.
Oh god,
because there was like a good 2 years where like I still played games on the 64, but I primarily was renting and playing things on PS1, and then Perfect Dark brought it back for that.
Three buddies and I, we would play that game every fucking day, nonstop.
That whole summer, every day,
because it had 4-player co-op against bots. It was incredible.
Destroyed, just utterly demolished that game.
And that was after we played GoldenEye for so long. But then Perfect Dark, once Perfect Dark came out, GoldenEye go on the shelf. Done.
Yeah. But yeah, I now like it's funny to even think back on it now. Like, even at the time, I consciously realized that I just had kind of outgrown that system a little bit and
it outgrew
jumped
itself.
on the PS1.
It ran out of stuff. That's what there's a reason there's less.
There was not anything on the 64 like Metal Gear Solid.
There's a reason there's less than 364 games, but there's like 800 or 900 PlayStation games.
PlayStation, yeah,
maybe even 1,000. I don't remember the last.
Well, also that moving over to CD, technology really helped the PlayStation. They helped keep the cost down.
Yeah.
So, because remember that was we were also battling the time of like we laugh today at $70, but like man, there were $90 cartridge games.
60, 70, 80 was not a weird price.
It was a lot easier to look over at the PS1, be like, well, this game is only $40 over here.
I remember I was using this as an example. Is there was one day my family and we were in Chicago and we were at Tower Records. Remember Tower Records? And they had 64 games there, and I remember seeing Harvest Moon 64. Was $79.99, and we're talking. This is like 98, 99.
Okay,
that's $80 30 years ago.
Yeah, unheard of.
That's wild.
Unheard of. It's crazy,
and that's why I was forced to rent most things. Like getting and buying a video game until I was in high school was like an unheard of that. We're like
special
it would be
occasion only.
It was a special occasion. It'd be a serious conversation. Like I remember having to explain. And I had a very good reason why, but when Perfect Dark came out, I had to explain why I was going to buy and not rent the game. And my explanation was because I rented GoldenEye 37 fucking times.
Yeah.
Because I did, and I counted it to prove my dad wrong, because he's like, well, because his argument was always, well, you can rent the game, you're never going to exceed what the game costs. And I did with GoldenEye.
Yeah.
Damn. But he never would let me buy that game.
That's why we had a standing rule in my house where it's like, if my dad realized I was renting the game more than like 2 or 3 times, I couldn't do it again.
Okay.
But I was also lucky enough to have a dad who, while he didn't play video games, he at least like appreciated them and thought they were cool. Yeah. Even though they were like beyond his limits. Like we would play Nintendo together, but by the time 64 rolled around, he just didn't
64 is what killed it.
Yeah.
Now I understand today.
Yeah,
I look back, I get why my parents bounced out on the 64. I can't play this.
But I remember like when I bought Zelda, because it was like for Christmas, it was like, what game do you want? And I said, I want Zelda, or if you can't find it, something else. And then, we were at Best, and they bought me Blitz because I didn't want Blitz, but
yeah.
We were at Best Buy and they were rolling that little card around. I found a Zelda on it, and I showed my dad. I was like, "This is Zelda right here." He goes, "We'll just get it." He's like, "We're just gonna get it." And I was like, "Oh." And then like when we got home and I played it, he watched me play it like an hour.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, it's cool." But the cost of that thing then was just wild. And for what it ended up being, I think it's too much.
Yeah.
But that's a Nintendo tax. It still exists. You're still paying it on Switch.
You still pay. Most of those games are still $10 more.
Yeah. And some of them are $10 more for a chip that doesn't even have the game on it.
Exactly.
Which is crazy. But now that the 64 is out for Analogue, what do they have left?
Haven't we discussed like they probably wouldn't do a PS1 or
I don't know. That other company did make that thing that did that, but
there's really no reason to do a Dreamcast.
No. It would be cool if they did.
It'd be cool if they did, but I
think a PS1 would be really cool if they did that.
Agreed.
We're on this flip side. If you made a PS1 and it was $250, 100%, I'd be like,
and make it where,
that's I'd be okay.
But the caveat for that is make a PS1 that's $250, and then, oh, you know what? It turns out it just plays burned discs. We didn't put in any kind of protection to stop that. Something like that, where it's like, can you play ROMs on the Pocket? Well, we didn't say you couldn't. It's like, we're not going to say you can.
But at that point, I'd almost rather them go like, well, it's a PS2, but it plays PS1 games as well.
Yeah, but you gotta think all of this is about like licensing and copyright and like how far behind stuff is.
Yeah, I think we're hitting the limit now.
That's why I think
64.
PS1 might be all we have left.
Yeah.
But if you could make me a cool looking PS1. Make it I want it to be a top loader. I don't want any trays because trays break.
Yeah.
Make it a top loader. And somehow it plays CDRs.
Make it a top, or make it like the systems now where it just sucks the disc in and out.
Even then, like those could break.
They could.
And for something like that, I would like just like a top load thing, and then it has a USB plug in it for reasons. Like, that's what I would want.
Why is that there? Don't worry about it.
It's for updates. Like, that's how you update it.
Yep. So that would be cool. And like I said, I would, on the flip side, I would pay $250 for a PS1 that did all that.
I'd be more inclined to buy that again if it, if it played more than just official games.
Mm-hmm.
I think at this point, if all you're going to sell me is a 4K version of something that can only play original game software, then I'm not that interested.
There's ways that you can do that.
I can literally do all of this in a different way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,